You ever have somebody walk up to your life like they own a remote control to it? Like they could just pause you, rewind you, and rewrite your story because they think they're in charge? That was the day it really started for me. The morning a woman I'd never met looked straight at my front gate and told me I didn't own it, like she was reading a line from a script she'd rehearsed 100 times. Like I was just some extra in her movie and she was the star. I was holding a cup of coffee, the steam curling in the cool air, and for a second I honestly thought it was a prank, like somebody was filming a reality show and I had missed the memo. But she wasn't joking, and by the way her heels sank in the dirt and her voice sliced through the quiet like a knife, she really believed she had authority over something she didn't build, didn't buy, didn't bleed for. My name's Evan Boone, and what I'm about to tell you isn't some wishful revenge story or a dramatic fairy tale. This is what happens when power gets comfortable, when people mistake proximity for possession, when someone looks at a line that existed decades before they did and decides it shouldn't matter anymore. My land sits right outside what used to be open country and turned into a perfectly planned suburb called Ridgefield Glade, the kind of place with matching lawns and matching smiles, and an HOA that likes to think it raised its right hand and swore in God himself. My grandfather, Thomas Boone, bought our 2 acres back in 1962 when the county was just fields, dust, and stubborn grass. He paid cash, built a small cedar house, planted trees like he was putting anchors into the earth, and then he did what most men don't bother to do anymore. He built a gate by hand, iron welded with patience, with a brass lock that clicked like certainty. When he passed, that land came to me, and I swear to you, I never took it for granted. I registered every document, paid every tax, kept every receipt organized like a promise I wasn't going to break. And somewhere in all that paperwork, I found a map from when the Ridgefield Glade HOA was created in 2006. Pretty boundaries drawn, neighborhood blocks outlined with care, and then a clean stop 40 yards before my driveway. Their lines ended. Mine began. No debt owed. No membership. No obligation. Clean. Black and white. In a story, or so I thought. The woman standing outside my gate that morning clearly didn't think so. She introduced herself like she was giving orders to soldiers. "I'm Valerie Grant, president of the Ridgefield Glade Homeowners Association," she said, chin high, clipboard tucked like a weapon, 2 board members flanking her in matching polos like backup singers. She didn't smile. She evaluated. Her eyes didn't look at me. They inspected me. And then she said it. "We need to inspect your property. Not, may we, not if you don't mind, just we need to." Like my land was a file on her desk, she forgot to finish. I remember laughing a little under my breath. Not disrespectful, just stunned. "Inspect it for what?" I asked, trying to stay calm, trying to stay civil, because you always start polite until you know what battlefield you're standing on. She flipped through her pages, speaking with that polished authority tone people practice in mirrors when they want to sound important. Tree branches overhanging regulations, gate not within aesthetic compliance, and you have unpaid association dues for the past 3 years. There was no confusion in my voice when I answered. "I'm not part of your HOA." There was no hesitation in hers when she dismissed it. "Everyone within this radius is." You could feel it right there. The collision of 2 worlds, the quiet, stubborn truth of documentation versus the loud, shiny confidence of a woman who'd never been told no and expected today wouldn't be the first time. Behind her, the board members shifted like they suddenly weren't sure anymore, like maybe I wasn't playing the role they'd assigned me. But Valerie didn't back down. She slid a notice through the iron bars. 14 days to trim my trees. Replace my gate with an approved beige composite one. Pay thousands in backdated dues, or they'd fine me daily. I didn't rip it up. Didn't yell. I folded it, tucked it in my back pocket, and told her as calmly as I could, "I won't be doing any of this." She stared at me like she'd just discovered something unpleasant on her shoe. "You will regret that decision." The way she said it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. They left, but the air didn't go back to normal. It hung heavy like the sky before a storm. I walked my property line, thinking about my grandfather's words. Boundaries aren't just lines, they're responsibilities. And I realized something important. This wasn't about trees or gates or dues. This was about control. This was about a woman who needed to prove she could bend the world to her rules, even when the world didn't belong to her. But here's the thing. Storms don't scare land that's been standing longer than the people try and claim it. And I wasn't alone. I had proof. I had patience. And I had a whole lot more grit than Valerie expected. And that's when things stopped being petty HOA drama and turned into something bigger, darker, and way more personal than I ever thought neighbors were capable of. You'd think after that first encounter things would cool down. Maybe they'd double-check their records, realize they'd overstepped, send one of those professional-sounding apology emails that doesn't really apologize but at least admits reality. But no, that would have required humility, and humility wasn't something Valerie stocked in bulk. Instead, what followed felt less like neighborhood management and more like a slow, calculated campaign, the kind of thing someone runs when they're used to winning and terrified of what it means if they don't. A few days passed quietly, just enough to make me think maybe I'd imagine the tension, but then the little things started showing up. People I'd never met slowing their cars near my gate. Phones angled out their windows like they were collecting evidence of a crime scene that didn't exist. Flyers tucked under the gate reminding me of community standards. A couple of HOA board members accidentally walking up to the fence line, pretending to check landscaping while very clearly trying to see into my yard. It stopped feeling annoying and started feeling invasive. You don't realize how sacred quiet is until someone tries to take it piece by piece. I told myself to breathe, stay patient, keep everything documented, just like Grandpa taught me. Paper matters, evidence matters. I installed an additional camera system. Offline, local storage, hidden where only a paranoid carpenter would think to look. And thank God I did, because patience wasn't Valerie's strong suit, and when patience runs out, power gets sloppy. The first escalation came at night. I woke up to the hiss of spray paint, that ugly, unmistakable sound of someone marking what isn't theirs. By the time I made it to the window, a car was already speeding off, taillights disappearing into the dark. Morning light revealed it. Big red letters bleeding down my black iron gate like a threat that didn't even bother hiding its pettiness. Pay or leave. For a second, I just stood there staring, coffee forgotten in my hand. Not angry yet, just stunned at how childish grown people can be when they believe they're untouchable. But then anger did come. Quiet, controlled, the kind that doesn't make you reckless, just absolutely determined. I didn't wipe it off. I documented it. Photos, video, screenshots, evidence folder. One more page in the story they were accidentally writing for me. My hidden camera had caught a shadowed figure, hoodie up, constantly glancing back at the road like even their conscience knew this was wrong. Couldn't see the face, not yet, but you could feel the fear in their movements. Cowards rarely stand still. Then came the letter. Thick paper, fancy stamp, county seal, or at least an imitation of one. Claimed my gate violated building codes, threatened removal, forced compliance, legal action, all the scary bureaucratic language meant to make people fold. But when you've handled real government documents for years, you learn their rhythm, and this one felt offbeat. No official appeal process listed, no real contact number, and an email address that screamed made in a hurry. I called the county anyway. The woman on the phone was calm, professional, almost apologetic when she told me, "We have no record of any violation." Then she said the part that really mattered. "If that letter's fake, it's a crime. You should report it." I didn't. Not yet. Because here's the thing. When people like Valerie think they're winning, they push harder, and when they push harder, they stop being careful. And that's when truth shows up, bold and undeniable. It was a Friday night when it happened, the kind of quiet where the world feels like it's holding its breath. My camera caught the SUV first. Dark, plates covered with tape like this was some low-budget crime thriller. Two figures stepped out. One carried bolt cutters. The other held a phone, ready to document whatever illegal victory they thought they were about to claim. And even before she stepped into the light, I recognized the posture. Rigid, proud, like authority was stitched into her spine. Valerie. They didn't even hesitate. The bolt cutters bit through the brass lock that had held my grandfather's promise for decades. That sound hurt more than the vandalism, more than the threats. It was the sound of someone believing they could rewrite history with arrogance and steel. They pushed the gate open and stepped inside my property like they'd always owned it, like trespassing was just asserting policy. And that's when I flipped the switch. The yard exploded in light. Every corner of the night ripped open, and they froze, wide eyes, guilty silhouettes suddenly human again. Police are on their way. I yelled, and my voice carried farther than I thought it could, fueled by months of swallowed frustration and every lesson my grandfather ever drilled into me about standing your ground without losing your soul. They panicked. Valerie stumbled. Something slipped from her neck and clattered against the gravel. They scrambled back into the SUV and tore away, leaving my gate bleeding open and my lock broken on the ground like a casualty. I walked out slow, recording everything, not angry now, just steady. On the gravel lay a pearl necklace. Real pearls, not cheap. The clasp? Engraved. Initials. Title. Proof handed to me by the universe with a sarcastic little bow. I bagged it like evidence because that's exactly what it was. The cops arrived. I showed them everything, videos, screenshots, the fake letter, the necklace. One of the officers watched the footage 3 times, leaned in when the light hit Valerie's face, clear as morning. He gave that slow nod officers do when their brain moves from maybe to absolutely. This is good evidence, he said. Real good. But the story didn't stop at police reports. A few days later, I got a call from someone who sounded nervous, even saying hello. She lived in Ridgefield Glade, she said. Worked as an accountant. Had watched Valerie rule the neighborhood like a queen who forgot she wasn't royalty. And she had recordings, board meetings, plans, comments like, he needs to learn who runs things here. She wasn't a hero by nature. She was just tired of watching someone abuse power and finally found the courage to do something about it. I took everything to my attorney. We filed trespassing, harassment, property damage, forgery. And when I say my attorney smiled reading through the file, I mean the relieved kind of smile, like justice finally had teeth again. But winning in silence wasn't enough anymore. I wanted truth out in the open. I wanted light where secrecy had been living rent-free. That's when the HOA heard about the lawsuit, and that's when their house of cards really started shaking. Because pride isn't just loud, it's fragile. And when you push back against people who think they're untouchable, they either break or they do something reckless enough to make sure everyone finally sees them for what they are. And trust me, what came next? That was the part nobody in Ridgefield Glade was ready for. When the court date finally came, the air in that small courtroom felt heavier than any room deserves to feel, like every whispered rumor, every bold lie, every quiet truth had followed us inside and was just waiting for someone brave enough to name it out loud. I sat on one side with my attorney and a neat stack of files, maps, certified letters, still frames for video, screenshots, and that pearl necklace sealed like a time capsule of arrogance. Across from us sat Valerie, polished as ever, navy suit perfect, hair perfect, chin lifted like confidence could still outrun evidence if it ran fast enough. But her hands, they were gripping the table a little too tight, like even she knew control was slipping through her fingers. The judge didn't waste time. She read the summary, glanced at the documents, looked up with eyes that had seen enough nonsense over the years to recognize it early. The HOA attorney tried to spin a story about community integrity, about me being uncooperative and disruptive to neighborhood standards, and I swear, if words could physically slide off polished wood, those ones would have. Because when it was our turn, my attorney didn't give a speech. She just opened the folder and laid out the simplest truth in the world. Your Honor, my client does not belong to the Ridgefield Glade HOA. He never has. That alone makes every action taken against him unlawful. She slid the county boundary map forward, the one that clearly showed the HOA jurisdiction stopping short of my driveway, like a clean cliff edge. The judge barely needed a minute. This is clear, she said. Crystal clear. And just like that, the very foundation Valerie built her crusade on cracked like glass. Then came the videos. The courtroom went silent as the spray paint flashed across the screen, the late-night trespassing, the SUV with taped plates, the bolt cutters biting into my grandfather's brass lock. And then that moment, the floodlights bursting on, Valerie frozen like guilt caught in the act, shock playing on her face. You could feel the room shift, the collective realization that this wasn't a leadership issue or a misunderstanding. This was entitlement dressed up in authority. We placed the pearl necklace on the evidence table, the clasp with her initials, the title she loved so much engraved like confession. My attorney didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Truth doesn't need volume. It just needs space to stand. Then we brought in the accountant, quiet voice, steady hands, courage she probably didn't know she had until that day. She testified about the closed-door meetings, the language Valerie used, the way she talked about teaching me a lesson, about making an example out of me so nobody else would dare question her. When it was all over, the judge stepped away for deliberation, though honestly, everyone in that room already knew where gravity was pulling this thing. When she came back, she didn't soften it. She talked about abuse of power, about trespassing and property damage, about felony forgery and community trust, and how leadership isn't supposed to feel like fear. Then she delivered the verdict, guilty on all charges. Valerie was ordered to pay damages, legal fees, and emotional compensation that actually exceeded what we'd even hoped for. Immediate resignation, a long ban from ever serving in leadership again. And the forgery? That was leaving the civil courtroom and walking straight into criminal territory. The gavel dropped, and it didn't sound like punishment. It sounded like balance snapping back into place. 3 days later, the police came for Valerie. Not secretly, not quietly. Right there in Ridgefield Glade where all those perfect lawns saw exactly what happens when power forgets humility. The video spread around the neighborhood faster than any HOA memo ever had. The board caved, the accountant stepped up as interim president, an audit was launched, apologies were sent, fines were refunded, and neighbors started talking to each other honestly for the first time in years. It wasn't pretty, but it was necessary. Sometimes communities only heal after truth burns through everything fake. And me? I went home. I repaired the gate, commissioned a new handmade brass lock, not because I needed closure, because I wanted continuity. I repainted the iron, replanted the crushed flowers, and when it was all done, I stood there like I always do in the evenings with a cup of coffee, letting the quiet settle back over the land like it remembered how to breathe. Life didn't turn perfect after that. It never does. Some neighbors wave with genuine warmth now, some with careful politeness. Some still won't meet my eyes because admitting someone else was right is harder than most people want to confess. But peace doesn't require applause. It just needs truth standing where it belongs. One morning months later, a kid on his way to school stopped at the gate, stared at the worn metal and fresh paint mix, and asked why I didn't just replace it with something newer, shinier, easier. I laughed and told him, because this one has a story, and some things aren't meant to be replaced, they're meant to be protected. He nodded like that made perfect sense, like maybe the next generation gets it faster than we did. And that's it. Not a triumph parade. Not vengeance fireworks. Just a man, a gate, a legacy, and a reminder that lines drawn in truth don't need permission to exist. Now here's where you come in. Tell me, was justice served, or was it too much? Do HOAs protect communities, or do they sometimes become their own worst enemies? And if this happened to you, would you fight or would you fold? I want to hear every opinion, every story. Drop it in the comments, share this with someone who loves a real-world plot twist, and tell me where you stand on power, pride, and the price of peace.